Our Leah Crowley has details on a dispute over mini Japanese vehicles.
DMV tells me there are about 30 of the miniature Japanese trucks in Rhode Island. State Senator Lou DePalma says a few of his constituents have these vehicles and received notices earlier this year from the DMV saying the owners must turn in their plates and registration.
This car just got banned across 12 U.S. states. And the reason is shocking. A regulatory earthquake is shaking the American automotive landscape, and thousands of vehicle owners have been caught completely off guard. In a sweeping and unprecedented move, 12 U.S. states have effectively banned Japanese mini-trucks known as K-trucks from public roads, despite these vehicles being legally imported and properly registered for years. Overnight, small business owners, farmers, and hobbyists have discovered their vehicles are now considered illegal, with registration renewals denied, insurance policies canceled, and their investments rendered virtually worthless. The impact is devastating for the thousands of landscapers, farmers, and small business owners who purchased these affordable trucks specifically for their reliability and practicality. Vehicles that cost between $8,000 and $12,000 and were legally registered for years are suddenly stranded on their owners' properties, impossible to sell and illegal to drive on public roads. These business owners now face an impossible choice: abandon their livelihoods or somehow find the money to replace their banned trucks with full-size American pickups costing 5 to 7 times more. Across the affected states, owners who thought they'd made a smart business investment in these fuel-efficient, maneuverable vehicles are now discovering that administrative decisions have effectively confiscated their legally purchased property without warning or compensation. You might assume this ban stems from typical safety concerns like crash test failures or emissions violations. But the truth is far more surprising and troubling. These vehicles aren't being banned due to mechanical defects or environmental hazards. They're being blacklisted through a coordinated administrative action that bypassed the normal legislative process entirely. No new laws were passed. No public hearings were held. No elected officials voted on these changes. What's even more shocking is what investigative reporting has uncovered about who's really behind these bans. While state DMVs are the public face of enforcement, internal documents reveal a powerful lobbying effort from major American truck manufacturers who see these affordable imports as a direct threat to their $70,000-plus profit margins. This isn't about safety. It's about eliminating competition that was offering Americans a practical alternative at 1/7 the price of domestic options. What's really happening behind this sudden wave of K-truck bans? How did perfectly legal vehicles become illegal overnight without any new laws being passed? And most importantly, what does this manufacturer-driven regulatory overreach mean for the thousands of Americans who invested in these vehicles and the fundamental rights of all vehicle owners? Let's dive into the disturbing reality of how corporate interests are quietly reshaping American roads through administrative manipulation. The vehicles in question. What are K-trucks? Before understanding the ban, we need to understand what's being banned. Japanese K-trucks are compact, cab-forward pickup trucks originally designed for Japan's narrow streets and small farming operations. Typically weighing under 1,500 pounds, these miniature trucks feature small but efficient engines, usually between 550 and 650 pounds, 660 cubic centimeters. Exceptional fuel economy, often exceeding 40 miles per gallon, and remarkable utility despite their diminutive size. These vehicles became legally importable to the United States under a federal exemption that allows vehicles 25-plus years old to enter the country without meeting modern safety and emission standards. This exemption, part of the 1988 Imported Vehicle Safety Compliance Act, was originally intended for classic car collectors but created an unintended pathway for practical work vehicles that addressed a market gap for affordable, efficient utility vehicles. In recent years, K-trucks have gained popularity among diverse groups: small farmers who appreciate their low cost and maneuverability in tight spaces, urban businesses needing compact delivery vehicles, landscapers working in dense neighborhoods, and even postal workers seeking fuel-efficient alternatives for rural routes. With prices typically ranging from $5,000 to $12,000, a fraction of the $50,000-plus starting price for new American pickups, K-trucks represented a practical solution for people who needed utility without excessive size or cost. What makes the current situation so jarring is that these vehicles were legally imported under federal law, properly registered through state DMVs, and have been operated without incident for years. The sudden reversal in their legal status has come without any change to the federal import laws that allowed them into the country in the first place. The corporate threat: why major manufacturers feared K trucks. The rise of K trucks coincided with a troubling trend in the American automotive market. The average price of pickup trucks has skyrocketed to unprecedented levels. According to industry data from July 2025, the average transaction price for a new full-size pickup truck now exceeds $73,000, with many popular models routinely crossing the $80,000 threshold when modestly equipped. This pricing strategy has been immensely profitable for domestic manufacturers. Full-size trucks generate profit margins of $15,000 to $20,000 per vehicle, far exceeding the margins on sedans or compact cars. This business model depends on convincing Americans that massive trucks are necessary for everyday tasks and worth their premium prices. K trucks posed a direct challenge to this narrative. Their practical utility demonstrated that many common tasks could be accomplished with vehicles a fraction of the size and price of modern American trucks. For under $10,000, small business owners and rural residents could purchase a functional utility vehicle that met their actual needs rather than paying $70,000 for capabilities they rarely used. Internal industry documents obtained through litigation discovery have revealed the extent of manufacturer concern. A 2023 memo from a major American truck manufacturer described the growing popularity of imported mini-trucks as a significant market disruption threat, and specifically noted that their low price points undermine established segment value perception. Translation: K trucks were showing consumers that they didn't need to spend $70,000 to get a functional work vehicle, and this realization threatened the premium pricing structure that domestic manufacturers had carefully cultivated over decades. Even more telling was an internal presentation from 2024 that outlined regulatory engagement strategies to address the mini truck importation issue. The presentation explicitly identified administrative channels rather than legislative approaches as the preferred method, noting that public legislative processes carry significant risk of consumer opposition. This preference for administrative action over public legislation reveals a calculated strategy to avoid democratic debate about vehicle choice and market competition. Manufacturers understood that many Americans would support affordable transportation options if given the chance to weigh in, so they specifically chose channels that minimized public input and scrutiny. The lobbying machine: how manufacturers influenced regulators. The connection between manufacturer concerns and regulatory action becomes undeniable when examining the coordinated lobbying effort that preceded the state-level bans. Industry data reveals that automotive manufacturers and their associated trade groups significantly increased their lobbying expenditures related to vehicle importation and state-level vehicle regulation starting in 2023, just months before the first wave of registration denials began. A particularly revealing money trail leads to the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, known as AAMVA, the non-governmental organization that coordinates policy among state DMVs. This organization, while presenting itself as a neutral administrative body, receives substantial funding from industry sources through sponsorships, technical partnerships, and participation in its conferences and events. In July 2024, AAMVA hosted a closed-door vehicle safety summit where representatives from major manufacturers presented alongside regulatory officials. According to the agenda obtained through public records requests, one session specifically addressed non-compliant imported mini vehicles and their regulatory challenges. No representatives from K truck importers, owners, or consumer advocacy groups were invited to present alternative perspectives. Following this summit, AAMVA distributed policy recommendations suggesting that K trucks should be reclassified as off-road only vehicles regardless of their previous registration status. Within months, state DMVs began implementing these recommendations with remarkable coordination and similar justifications, despite the absence of any new legislative action or public safety incidents involving these vehicles. The manufacturer influence extended beyond general policy pressure to specific technical arguments. The crash test video that became central to safety justifications for the bans was produced by a testing facility with direct financial ties to domestic auto manufacturers. The test, which showed a dramatic collision between a K truck and a full-size pickup, used non-standardized protocols specifically designed to create visually impactful footage rather than scientifically valid safety data. This manufactured evidence was then distributed to state regulators and media outlets without context about the test's limitations or the selective nature of the safety concerns. No comparable testing was conducted or promoted regarding the pedestrian safety risks posed by increasingly large domestic trucks, despite NHTSA data showing such risks have increased substantially as truck sizes have grown. The administrative ban. How bureaucrats implemented the industry's agenda. The mechanism behind the K truck ban reveals a troubling reality about administrative power in America. Unlike typical vehicle restrictions, which come through legislation or formal rulemaking, the K truck ban emerged through a coordinated shift in administrative interpretation across multiple states simultaneously. What's particularly concerning is how this guidance was implemented. There were no public announcements, no opportunity for affected owners to comment, no formal votes by elected officials. Instead, state DMVs simply began applying new interpretations to existing rules, often citing vague safety concerns without specific evidence or studies. The implementation varied slightly by state but followed a disturbing pattern. In Massachusetts, the Registry of Motor Vehicles began rejecting registration renewals and adding not-for-highway use restrictions to previously approved vehicles. In Pennsylvania, owners received letters stating their registrations would not be renewed due to non-compliance with state safety standards, standards that hadn't changed since their initial registration. In Ohio, DMV officials began flagging K-truck VINs in their system, triggering automatic rejections even for vehicles that had been registered for years. In Washington state, owners discovered their vehicles had been reclassified as off-road utility vehicles without notification, rendering their current registrations invalid. In each case, the shift came not through democratic processes, but through administrative reinterpretation, a method that effectively shields these decisions from public scrutiny and legislative oversight. This approach has left owners with limited recourse, as they're fighting not against a new law that could be challenged directly, but against bureaucratic interpretations that shift like quicksand. Perhaps most revealing about the coordinated nature of these actions is their timing. 12 states implemented substantially similar restrictions within a 9-month period, despite having different vehicle codes, different regulatory structures, and different political leaderships. This unusual synchronization strongly suggests external coordination rather than independent safety assessments by each state. The financial impact, the real cost to real Americans. The human cost of these administrative bans has been severe and immediate. For small business owners who invested in K-trucks as affordable work vehicles, the financial impact extends far beyond the loss of their vehicle's value. James Rodriguez, a landscaper in Washington state, built his 3-person business around 2 imported mini trucks that allowed him to navigate tight urban spaces while carrying all necessary equipment. When his registrations were suddenly invalidated in March 2025, he faced an impossible choice: spend over $100,000 to replace them with full-size American trucks or lose his livelihood. "These trucks cost me $9,000 each," Rodriguez explained in a recent interview. "The cheapest American pickup that could carry my equipment starts at $45,000. I'm a small business. I can't absorb that kind of cost increase overnight just because some bureaucrat decided my legal trucks are suddenly illegal." Similar stories are emerging across affected states. A small organic farm in Oregon reported having to cancel their local delivery program after their K-truck was banned from public roads. A mobile coffee business in Colorado had to shut down entirely when their mini truck, which had been their primary business vehicle for 3 years, could no longer be legally driven or insured. The financial damage extends beyond operating costs to asset values. K-truck owners have seen the value of their vehicles collapse virtually overnight, with many reporting they cannot sell their trucks for even 25% of what they paid just months earlier. This represents a direct financial loss imposed by administrative action without any compensation or legislative oversight. What makes this situation particularly galling for many owners is the blatant protection of domestic manufacturer interests at the expense of small businesses and individual consumers. The same regulatory agencies that moved with remarkable speed to ban affordable imported options have taken no action regarding the documented safety issues with increasingly large domestic trucks, especially their pedestrian safety risks due to tall hood heights and extensive front blind spots. This selective application of safety concerns has led many affected owners to conclude that the regulations have nothing to do with actual safety and everything to do with protecting the profit margins of politically connected manufacturers. The citizen rebellion, fighting back in Texas and Massachusetts. What makes this story particularly remarkable is how citizens are beginning to fight back successfully against these administrative actions. In Texas, one of the first states to implement K-truck restrictions, affected owners mobilized with surprising effectiveness. When the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles announced it would begin revoking K-truck registrations in early 2023, a grassroots response emerged almost immediately. Owners created online forums, coordinated through social media, and began systematically challenging the legal basis for the restrictions. They cited specific provisions in both federal import law and the Texas state constitution that protect lawfully acquired property. Their approach was methodical and legally sophisticated. Rather than merely protesting, they engaged with state legislators, providing documented evidence of how these vehicles had been legally imported, properly registered, and safely operated for years. They emphasized the economic impact of the ban on small businesses and rural communities where K-trucks had become essential tools. The pressure campaign worked. By mid-2024, the Texas legislature passed a bipartisan bill explicitly protecting the on-road use of previously registered K-trucks. The legislation represented a direct rebuke to administrative overreach and established a precedent that other states are now watching closely. A similar scenario played out in Massachusetts, where K-truck owners employed an even more innovative approach to fighting back. When the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles began denying renewals, owners coordinated through online forums to create a searchable database of affected vehicles and their registration histories. This allowed them to demonstrate the inconsistency and arbitrary nature of the new restrictions. Their masterstroke came through an unconventional communication strategy. Rather than limiting their outreach to traditional channels, they launched a coordinated LinkedIn messaging campaign targeting state transportation officials and legislators directly. This professional, persistent approach broke through bureaucratic barriers and forced acknowledgement of the issue. By July 2025, Massachusetts officials had implemented a compromise allowing existing K-trucks to maintain limited road access through a special registration category. While not a complete victory, it represented a significant concession and demonstrated that organized citizens can successfully challenge administrative edicts. The Constitutional Showdown, the federal lawsuit that could change everything. The fight over K-trucks has now escalated to the federal court system, where a coalition of owners, importers, and civil liberties organizations has filed a landmark lawsuit challenging the legality of these administrative bans. The case raises fundamental constitutional questions about administrative power, property rights, and the influence of corporate interests on regulatory actions. At the core of the lawsuit is a straightforward legal argument. Vehicles that were legally imported under federal law, properly registered under state procedures, and owned as lawful property cannot be retroactively banned without due process and just compensation. The plaintiffs argue that the coordinated administrative action across multiple states constitutes an unlawful taking of property without legislative authority. The case has already survived initial motions to dismiss, with a federal judge noting that serious questions exist regarding the authority of administrative agencies to effectively nullify federally compliant imports through registration restrictions. Legal experts suggest the case could eventually reach the Supreme Court, potentially setting precedent for limits on administrative action more broadly. What makes this case particularly significant is its implications beyond K-trucks specifically. The outcome could establish new boundaries for how administrative agencies interact with citizen property rights and how industry influence shapes regulatory decisions. It challenges the growing trend of governance through administrative guidance rather than legislative action. Perhaps most importantly, the case has already forced disclosure of internal communications that demonstrate the extent of manufacturer involvement in promoting the bans. These revelations have shifted public perception, with increasing recognition that the restrictions were driven more by market protection than genuine safety concerns. The implications of the K-truck ban extend far beyond the immediate impact on vehicle owners. This case represents a pivotal moment in the relationship between corporate influence, administrative agencies, and citizen rights, with consequences that could affect millions of Americans regardless of whether they've ever seen a K-truck. For the estimated 30,000 K-truck owners in affected states, the financial impact is immediate and severe. Vehicles purchased legally for $8,000 to $12,000 have been rendered nearly worthless overnight. Small businesses built around these affordable utility vehicles face existential threats. A landscape business in Oregon reported laying off 3 employees after losing the use of their 2K trucks, unable to afford the $60,000 required to replace them with new American pickups. Beyond the direct economic damage lies a more profound question about property rights in America. If administrative agencies can effectively nullify lawfully purchased and registered vehicles without legislative action or compensation, what other property might be subject to similar treatment? The precedent being established creates uncertainty about the stability of property rights more generally. The ban also raises serious concerns about corporate influence over regulatory decisions. When major manufacturers can effectively eliminate competing products through administrative channels rather than market competition, it fundamentally undermines the principles of free markets and consumer choice that supposedly guide the American economy. Perhaps most significantly, this case highlights the growing gap between regulatory systems and practical reality. As climate concerns and urban density increase the need for smaller, more efficient vehicles, regulatory barriers that enforce American automotive gigantism run contrary to evolving social needs. The ban on practical, efficient utility vehicles comes precisely when environmental and economic pressures suggest we should be encouraging such alternatives. Here's what makes the K-truck ban truly extraordinary. It reveals a regulatory system increasingly captured by the very industries it's supposed to be regulating. This isn't simply a story about unusual Japanese mini-trucks. It's about how corporate influence shapes administrative decisions to protect established profit models at the expense of consumer choice and small business needs. The evidence points to a clear conclusion. These vehicles weren't banned because they were unsafe. They were banned because they were too affordable, too practical, and too threatening to the established price structure of the American truck market. They offered a solution that domestic manufacturers weren't willing to provide: genuine utility at reasonable cost without unnecessary size and expense. What's particularly revealing is the method chosen to eliminate this competition. Rather than competing on price or features or lobbying for transparent legislation that would face public scrutiny, manufacturers worked through administrative channels specifically designed to minimize public input and accountability. This approach allowed them to effectively eliminate market alternatives without having to publicly defend their actions or confront the consumers who would benefit from these affordable options. The K-truck controversy illuminates a troubling reality about the American automotive market. It is not primarily shaped by consumer preferences or practical needs, but by regulatory structures heavily influenced by incumbent manufacturers seeking to protect their profit margins. The freedom to choose appropriate vehicles for specific needs is increasingly constrained not by technology limitations or genuine safety requirements, but by administrative decisions driven by corporate interests. The ban on K-trucks across 12 states isn't just a niche regulatory dispute about unusual Japanese vehicles. It's a warning sign about how powerful corporate interests can manipulate administrative systems to eliminate competition and restrict consumer choices without democratic accountability. For thousands of Americans who invested in these practical, affordable utility vehicles, the impact is devastating and immediate. Their legally purchased and properly registered vehicles have been rendered worthless by administrative decree rather than legislative action. Small businesses built around these efficient trucks face existential threats, unable to afford the $70,000 alternatives that domestic manufacturers offer. But the implications extend far beyond the specific vehicles involved. When administrative agencies can be influenced to eliminate market competition rather than promote it, when legally imported vehicles can be retroactively banned without compensation, and when corporate profit protection takes precedence over small business needs, it represents a fundamental distortion of market principles that should concern every American. The fight over K-trucks has evolved from a specialized dispute into a constitutional showdown with far-reaching implications for property rights, administrative power, and market freedom. And as citizens organize and push back through both legislative channels and legal challenges, they're not just fighting for the right to drive imported mini trucks, they're defending basic principles of democratic governance and economic fairness that affect us all. Are you a K-truck owner affected by these bans? We want to hear your story in the comments below. Have you found ways to challenge registration denials or work with local officials to protect your vehicle rights? Your experience could help others facing similar situations. Even if you don't own one of these vehicles, this issue affects principles that matter to all vehicle owners. What do you think about administrative agencies having the power to retroactively ban legally purchased vehicles? Should there be stronger limits on how DMVs can interpret and apply regulations? Don't forget to subscribe for ongoing updates on this developing story, including our upcoming coverage of the federal lawsuit that could decide the future of K-trucks and potentially set new limits on administrative power. The fight for these quirky Japanese mini-trucks has become an unexpected battleground for American principles, and we'll be following every development.